Welcome to the deep dive. We've got your sources, and our goal here is to pull out those key insights, the stuff that really matters, to get you well-informed, without all the heavy reading.
That's right.
And today, we're tackling something pretty crucial: how you can actually save effectively when you're on a low income. The side-by-side article you sent over. It's a great resource full of practical advice that feels, really relevant right now in 2025.
Yeah, especially with costs going up and the general economic uncertainty.
Exactly. And the surprising thing might be that building savings, even on a tight budget, it isn't just about cutting everything back. It's more about making strategic choices.
Right. Choices that can actually lead to some real financial breathing room.
So what's the mission today?
Well, our goal with this deep dive, it's not about quick fixes. We want to give you actionable strategies, a real understanding of why saving is so important, especially when money's tight.
Addressing those everyday hurdles.
Exactly. The things that make saving feel almost impossible sometimes. We want to help you build that sense of financial stability, control whatever your income level is.
So shifting focus, not just cutting back, but making smart choices that line up with your goals.
Precisely. Making informed decisions.
And side-by-side really hits this point hard. Saving on a low income, it's not like some impossible dream.
Not at all.
It's definitely achievable if you have the right mindset,
Yeah.
Moving past just slashing expenses to actively making those smart, goal-focused choices.
It's about gaining leverage, really, even when resources feel limited.
Yeah. And side-by-side brings up that statistic, the 2024 Federal Reserve one. It's pretty sobering.
The one about the $400 emergency.
Yeah. 37% of adults couldn't cover it. And when you think about what low income means in 2025, under 200% of the federal poverty line.
Which is about $30,120 for a single person.
Right. So that $400 shock, it hits even harder. It just shows why having even a small savings buffer is so critical.
Absolutely. For that financial resilience.
And it's interesting how side-by-side contrasts this with, the culture around us.
All the pressure to consume.
Yeah, constantly. But then there's this counter trend in 2025, this frugal living thing you see popping up on platforms like X.
It feels timely.
It really does. And, technology helps now, too. More access to budgeting apps, finding side hustles.
Definitely more tools at our disposal.
Yeah.
And side-by-side, to its credit, doesn't ignore the real challenges.
No, it doesn't.
Things like wages not keeping up, that 2.5% inflation we're seeing early in 2025, and housing costs just keep climbing.
Yeah, those aren't just numbers on a page. They directly impact people's budgets, especially tight ones.
Which makes finding effective ways to save even more essential, not just like a nice to have.
Okay, so let's dive into the practical stuff. Side-by-Side starts with budgeting, calling it the foundation.
The bedrock, yeah.
And they frame it not as deprivation, but as gaining clarity, setting priorities. Why is budgeting so fundamental, especially on a lower income?
Well, I think a big part of it is the sense of control it gives you. When things feel unpredictable financially, budgeting helps.
Right.
And that National Foundation for Credit Counseling survey from 2024 that Side-by-Side mentions, it really highlights this.
The difference between those with and without a budget?
Huge difference. 60% without a budget struggled to save versus only 25% with one. It's about consciously deciding where your money goes instead of just wondering where it vanished.
It's empowerment, really, through awareness.
Exactly.
Side-by-Side talks about different budgeting methods. The 50-30-20 rule comes up.
Which is a good starting point for some.
But they suggest maybe a 7-20-10 split might be more realistic for tighter budgets, with that 10% going to savings. Why is even that small 10% so important?
Because it makes saving a concrete habit. It's not just something you do if there's money left over.
Oh, okay.
It proves to yourself that saving is possible, even if it's a small amount. That consistency builds momentum. It shifts your thinking from, I can't save, to, I am a saver.
That makes sense. The article also stresses tracking everything, really tracking it.
Every penny.
They mention apps like Mint, YNAB, and now these AI tools in 2025 that automatically sort expenses. How does that detailed tracking actually help you save?
It gives you that crucial visibility. Often we just don't realize where the money's actually going. Little things add up.
Yeah?
AI tools just make that process, easier and maybe more accurate. They spot patterns you might miss, showing you where you could potentially cut back. It turns unconscious spending into conscious choices.
Okay. Then Side-by-Side gets into zero-based budgeting.
Right, where every single dollar gets a job.
They use an example, say $1,500 a month income. You allocate it all until you hit zero. What's the main benefit there, especially with
Right.
less income?
The real strength is that it forces intentionality. Every dollar has a purpose. So you're way less likely to spend impulsively or just, lose track.
Makes sense.
For low-income earners, that level of focus can be really powerful for making the most of what you have, ensuring essentials are covered first.
And for a more hands-on approach, there's the envelope system, physical or digital. How does that help keep spending in check?
It creates really clear boundaries. Once the cash in the groceries envelope is gone, it's gone.
Right. No dipping into other funds.
Exactly. That physical or even visual digital limit is a strong psychological tool to stop overspending in categories where it's easy to lose track, like eating out or entertainment.
SideBySide uses Maria's story to illustrate this. Used zero-based budgeting, tracked her spending,
On a $2,000 monthly income, yeah.
found she was spending $150 on takeout, cut it way back, and managed to save $75 a month. That's $900 in a year, enough for a car repair.
It's a great example.
What's the key takeaway there?
It really shows the power of just knowing where your money goes and then prioritizing. Maria found a non-essential expense she could reduce without, ruining her life. And that small, consistent change added up significantly. The takeaway: small adjustments done consistently lead to real results.
But budgets can feel really restrictive. That's a common complaint. SideBySide suggests a miscellaneous category. Why is that little buffer so important?
Because life happens. Unexpected things always pop up. Without that miscellaneous fund, a small surprise expense can totally wreck your budget and make you feel like you failed.
Yeah, and then you just give up.
Right. So building in that flexibility, that contingency, makes you much more likely to actually stick with the budget long term.
Okay, budgeting is the foundation. Now, SideBySide moves to cutting costs, but smartly. Not just slashing and burning, but strategic spending.
Right. Spending more strategically, not just less.
And they point out, grocery prices up 3% from last year, housing eating up maybe 40% of low-income budgets.
Yeah.
It makes strategy essential.
Absolutely critical.
So where are the biggest opportunities for smart cuts?
Well, SideBySide flags groceries and housing, and rightly so. They're big chunks of most budgets. For groceries, that USDA study showing 20% savings just from meal planning, that's huge.
Wow, 20%?
Yeah. It's about planning ahead. And things like buying in bulk, maybe splitting with a friend, using store brands, which are often 30% cheaper.
And coupon apps, too. I bought a Flip.
Exactly. Those can save you $5, $10, even $20 a trip sometimes. It adds up.
Okay, groceries make sense. What about housing hacks? SideBySide mentions negotiating rent. Is that realistic in 2025?
It can be, especially if you're a good tenant. Maybe offering to sign a longer lease or pay slightly early could give you some leverage for a small discount. It depends on the market, of course.
And shared living.
Yeah, platforms like Roomie make finding roommates easier. It's a major cost saver for many people, though obviously requires finding the right situation.
Definitely. Then there's utilities and subscriptions, simple stuff like LED bulbs.
Energy efficiency, yeah. Energy Star says simple things like LEDs and unplugging devices can save 10–15%.
And just auditing your subscriptions. Do you really need 3 streaming services? Maybe share an account?
That's a big one. Those $10, $15 monthly charges seem small, but they accumulate. Combining savings across utilities, subscriptions, maybe an unused gym membership, it can free up a surprising amount each month.
Transportation, too. SideBySide mentions carpooling, public transit.
And potential discounted passes for low-income residents in 2025, which is important to check out.
Biking, walking for short trips. How do you make those stick?
Planning is key. Coordinating carpool schedules, learning bus routes, maybe making biking or walking enjoyable by picking nice routes.
Yeah.
Having a backup for bad weather helps too.
Right. John's case study shows this working. Retail worker, $1,800 a month. Saved $80 on groceries with meal planning.
Switched to a prepaid phone, saved $30.
Carpooled, saved another $60. That's $170 a month, freed up. He saved half, built over $1,000 for emergencies in a year.
It really shows how combining smaller changes across different areas adds up. You don't need one massive cut.
But what about quality of life? Doesn't constant cutting get depressing?
That's a valid point, and SideBySide acknowledges it. Balance is crucial.
So small indulgences.
Yeah, planning for small treats or experiences that you value. Factoring them into the budget prevents that feeling of total deprivation. It makes the whole thing sustainable. Maybe batch cooking saves money and time during the week. Reducing stress. It's about finding what works for you.
Okay, good point. Next, SideBySide talks about leveraging resources, government help, nonprofits, community stuff, things people often underutilize.
Especially now in 2025, with more digital access and maybe increased funding for some programs.
What are the key ones people should know about?
Well, SNP, the Food Assistance Program, can mean up to like $221 a month for one person in 2025. That's significant.
Definitely.
LIHEAP helps with heating and cooling bills, potentially up to $600 a year. And the Earned Income Tax Credit, the EITC.
That's the tax one, right?
Yeah, it can be anywhere from $500 to $7,000 a year, depending on income and family size. Super important to file taxes, even if you don't owe anything, just to get that credit.
Wow, okay. And nonprofits.
Local food banks are vital. Feeding America's network helped over 5 million households in 2024. And groups like Modest Needs offer small, one-time grants for emergencies.
Then there are community things like Buy Nothing groups.
Yeah, those are fantastic. Free exchange of goods, usually on Facebook or maybe X now. Great for finding things you need without spending money.
And libraries, they're not just books anymore.
Not at all. Free internet, computer access, often job training workshops, sometimes even tool rentals in 2025. Seriously underused resources.
SideBySide also mentions retailer discounts, like Amazon Prime sometimes being cheaper for qualifying individuals.
Right. Worth checking eligibility directly with retailers or through those benefits verification portals. Amazon's is what, $6.99 a month if you qualify?
Lisa's story ties this together. Part-time caregiver, $1,600 a month, got $200 from S&M.
Which freed up $150 for savings and debt.
And saved another $50 monthly using a Buy Nothing group. She saved $2,400 in 18 months for a car down payment.
It really shows how layering these different resources can have a massive impact. It's not just one thing, it's using multiple tools.
But navigating these programs, the paperwork, maybe feeling embarrassed, it can be a barrier.
It can be. But SideBySide points out online portals like benefits.gov can help streamline things. And many nonprofits offer virtual support now.
So the advice is,
try to focus on your financial goals and well-being. These programs exist to help. Think of them as tools, not handouts. Overcoming that initial hesitation can make a huge difference.
okay, let's switch gears to boosting income. Side hustles. SideBySide says even a small income bump can make a big difference for savings.
Especially with the gig economy being what it is in 2025. Platforms like Upwork, TaskRabbit, Etsy, they make it easier to find opportunities.
And that gig economy index stat, 36% of low-income workers earning an average of $500 extra a month in 2024. That's significant.
It really is. It shows it's a viable path for many.
So what are some low-cost ways to start? Online ideas.
SideBySide suggests freelancing writing, graphic design, data entry on Fiverr or Upwork. Maybe start with lower rates to build experience. Or things like online surveys, micro tasks on platforms like Swagbucks or Amazon Mechanical Turk. Not huge money, maybe $30, $50 a month for an hour a day, but it's something.
What about local stuff, more hands-on?
Pet sitting, dog walking, using apps like Rover. You could earn, say, $15, $25 per walk, or reselling finding deals at thrift stores or clearance racks and selling them online on eBay or Poshmark.
Like finding a $5 item and selling it for $20.
Exactly. Takes a bit of an eye for value, but can be profitable.
And skill-based hustles. Teaching something.
Yeah, tutoring, teaching cooking, maybe through community centers or online platforms like Perply. Starting rates might be around $10 an hour.
Or creating digital products.
Like printables or simple ebooks on Etsy. That can become passive income after the initial creation work.
Sarah's example is good here. Barista, $1,400 a month. Added $200 pet sitting, $100 selling candles on Etsy.
Allowed her to save $150 a month, built an $1,800 emergency fund in a year.
What does her story show?
It really highlights diversifying. She didn't rely on just one thing. If pet sitting was slow one month, maybe candle sales picked up. It adds resilience.
But the time and energy factor,
Yeah,
that's real for people working low-wage jobs, often multiple jobs.
absolutely. And SideBySide advises starting small, like really small, maybe just 5 hours a week.
And choosing something you actually like.
Or that uses skills you already have.
Yeah.
Makes it feel less like a chore. And if money's tight for startup costs, focus on free options like surveys or basic freelancing first.
Okay, finally, let's talk about making savings stick long-term. Building habits. SideBySide gets into the psychology here.
Right. Citing the behavioral economics study, consistent small savings habits led to 40% higher savings over 5 years. It's the consistency that matters.
So how do you build that sustainable habit?
Automating is key. Set up automatic transfers, even tiny amounts, to a high-yield savings account. Places like Ally or Marcus were offering, 4 or 5% interest in 2025?
Makes the money work a bit harder for you.
Exactly. Also, setting clear goals, maybe with visual reminders. Celebrating small milestones with low-cost rewards. And crucially, Avoiding lifestyle inflation.
Meaning, if you get a raise, don't just spend it all.
Right. Try to direct a good chunk of any extra income towards your savings goals.
SideBySide recommends free financial education, too. Where can people look?
Khan Academy is great for easy-to-understand finance basics. SideBySide's own YouTube channel. Local libraries often have workshops. Just keep learning.
Mark's story shows automation working. Warehouse worker, $2,200 a month. Automated just $20 bi-weekly.
To a high-yield account. Small amount.
Set a $1,000 emergency fund goal. Learned about avoiding impulse buys from SideBySide videos. Saved $1,200 plus about $50 interest in 2 years. Covered a medical bill.
It just proves that small, consistent, automated steps add up. You don't need huge windfalls. Let time and consistency do the work.
But resisting temptation, social media pressure, that's hard.
It is. SideBySide suggests curating your feed, unfollow accounts that make you want to spend. Try to connect with more frugal-minded people, online or offline.
Like the Our Frugal community online.
Yeah, places like that can offer support and motivation. And revisiting why you're saving can help refocus when you're tempted to splurge.
SideBySide does acknowledge the bigger picture, wage stagnation, housing costs. Systemic issues are real.
They are. And the article doesn't pretend individual action solves everything, but it emphasizes focusing on what you can control.
And the emotional side. Frugality can be tough.
Absolutely. It's important to be kind to yourself, acknowledge the challenges, find support. Remember that even a small emergency fund makes a huge difference to your peace of mind. It's about progress, not perfection.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the message from SideBySide seems clear. Saving on a low income, it's definitely challenging, no doubt.
But it is achievable. Through that mix of strategies, the budgeting, the smart cost cutting, using resources, boosting income, and really building those long-term habits.
And those stories, Maria, John, Lisa, Sarah, Mark, they're not just anecdotes. They show that small, consistent steps really do lead to significant progress.
Yeah, they offer real proof it can be done.
And it feels like in 2025, there are more tools than ever to help, right? Budgeting apps, community support, side hustle options.
Definitely. There's more available to empower people to take financial control, even with limited means.
And ultimately, the why goes beyond just money, doesn't it? It's about peace of mind.
Freedom from that constant financial stress. That's invaluable.
So the call to action from SideBySide is basically just start, even if it's just $1.
Exactly. Every single step forward counts. Don't wait for the perfect moment.
Okay, so a final thought for you listening. What's your first move? Your first concrete step toward feeling more financially free?
Maybe it's downloading one of those budgeting apps we talked about, or just looking up your local Buy Nothing group online.
Or spending, say, 30 minutes this week brainstorming a side hustle idea that fits your skills.
The journey starts now. Take it $1 at a time. And to help you think about that first step, here are those follow-up questions from SideBySide to reflect on.
First, how can you find just one expense in your budget to cut this month, something that won't really impact your quality of life?
Second, what local resources or programs might be available right there in your community to support households with lower incomes? Take a look around.
And third, which side hustle idea kind of clicks with your skills and your schedule? And how could you potentially start it with very little or even no upfront cost?